Welcome to Kingdom Mothers Rise Up, where I encourage and equip you to heal your heart and renew your mind so you can live the fully abundant life Jesus promised you. Let's go. It's time to move.
Mary Whitman Ortiz is with me, and I'm super excited to talk to you. You said something in our messaging about not suppressing your voice, and I was like, I need to hear more about that.
I think most every woman on the planet needs to hear more about that.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we'll talk about that.
Sure. I am a relationship coach, and my specialty is to help women and couples talk about healthy intimacy. And that is one of those areas where we as a society have suppressed the topic. That's why this is so interlinked, because when you are able to value your own voice and find ways that you're comfortable expressing yourself, not everybody's an extrovert, not everybody is just loud and in charge, but when you're comfortable in your own skin, then you're even able to go to these areas that are really delicate.
What led you to work in this area?
Well, God is so good in that the healing and wholeness that he brings to you, I feel, can be what the adage is, he turns your mess into a message. Mm-hmm. So my past story is previously married, found out my husband was addicted to pornography. But I didn't speak up because it's so shameful and I had no language for it. And I was predisposed to not expressing myself. My family growing up, it was not really a place where you talked about your thoughts, your feelings, your needs. So I was pretty good at that suppressing thing and didn't realize how much I was missing out. I also thought, hey, I'm a Christian. He's a Christian. Doesn't that just mean we automatically have a Christian marriage? And no, that's not necessarily the case. So it took me decades to deal with some of these things. And after my marriage ended and I'm in round 3 or 4 with counseling and inner healing prayer and all of that, that's when I was able to get some breakthrough. And then from that point, it just seemed like everyone I talked to was in a similar situation. And I began to get more training to be specific to help with those needs. And I'm happily remarried. But as it turns out, my story continues. So that is when I transitioned to talk more about healthy intimacy, because it's just for women, it is something that ages with you, and there are new needs as you progress and new reasons to be able to have your voice.
What was it like for you realizing, like in your first marriage, you said, like at first you're just kind of feel stuck and like, I'm not allowed to speak up. I don't know what to say. He's a Christian. I'm a Christian. We have to make this work. I guess just a little bit of what was that journey like for you to get to the point where you knew that wasn't true and that wasn't God's best for you?
I really like how you put that, and probably describing what is God's best is a great framework for that, because I wanted to be married. I wanted to stay married. And I think one of the mindsets that's common in church language is I use the phrase divorce centric, meaning don't get a divorce at all cost, even if you're dying in yourself and in your marriage. So that was a dominant thought, a mindset that I had to counter. But as I said, it literally was decades. I mean, I knew like within the first 3 months of the marriage, something wasn't right. I knew that the sexual intimacy that I was experiencing, well, it was basically sex without intimacy. And I, as I said, didn't have language for that. I didn't feel valued, loved, nurtured, cherished. I felt like a body in a bed. And to even say that out loud is crushing, because here you are, a newlywed. I had not had sex before I got married. I had a lot of dreams and hopes. And even on my wedding night, I remember walking the beach praying, God, is this what it was all about? I was devastated. But I was walking by myself on my honeymoon without my husband, because I was just absolutely distraught. So I continued in prayer. And God brought me through. So I believe he answered my prayer. It wasn't even an option, as you were saying. I didn't even know it was a possibility to have changes happen and to experience something different. So I did a lot of work on my own. I brought things up at times. We ended up leading couples groups in the church because I was committed. We're going to do this. Of course, I would do all of the study and then just nudge him to make a couple of points. He was a big presence. He kind of walked into the room and got attention and filled the space. And I sort of thought, okay, that's your thing. I'll do everything else. And I didn't realize at the time that that's sort of like narcissism. And in conjunction with a addiction to pornography, there's usually some type of abuse. Most types of addiction include abuse because people are not processing in a healthy way. So as my life progressed, I just began to, I found lots of outlets. I just realized this the other day, that in my church world, I was very engaged and involved. In my community, in my work, I was trying new things. I was exploring. And basically in every other way besides my role as a wife, I had my voice, but I did not make the crossover because, there's so many other variables at work there.
Yeah. And like you said, coming from an environment, because I did too, of where you don't talk about what you think and what you feel. So like being the good Christian, being the good daughter was not having a voice. And so it feels like too often the church culture reinforces that message. Being the good Christian wife, being the good Christian woman is staying in that role of just don't rock the boat and don't need anything. And like, you're here to serve and make things happen. And as long as that is, we're all good. And like, that's so unhealthy.
Oh, it is. It is.
But it seems to be everywhere. And like for you, like it doesn't even open up that option that, wait a minute, this isn't what God wants for me. This isn't an abundant life. This isn't a marriage that reflects his love for the church. Yet we're told, just stay, just try harder, just pray more. Just
every time I would read some of the passages about marriage, I always owned my part and felt that it was my fault for the way things were. I think it had been insinuated. I don't know if he specifically said, it's all your fault, but I internalized that and just overlooked all of that wonderful nurturing that was supposed to come from him. Because if I hadn't been, I hate to say blinded, it was just too difficult to face. I didn't know I was avoiding it. But now I read those and I'm like, oh, the encouragement that God gives to the husband, he gives equal to the wife. And so both parts are totally represented.
You're leading couple studies with him. You're growing in other areas, and this area is still dying. What helped you see that this has to change? This isn't okay.
It's funny, like the tipping point, I'm sure it was the culmination of things, but the specific thing that I remembered that prompted me to do some more research and reach out was a Yahoo title of an article on the internet. And the title was basically why your sex life is important to your mother-in-law.
That'll catch your attention.
Exactly. Rocked me back on my heels. In essence, it was a good article because the idea was, if your sex life is healthy, your marriage is healthy, and your mother-in-law, your mother, everybody would be happy because they want your marriage to be strong and to be vibrant. But I had never, it was objective. It was not a view I was hearing from the church. I probably had lost some of my aptitude for church messages, or they had been gone through my filter for so long that I internalized it the same way over and over. But this time I began to ask the deeper questions. And I have a wonderful female cousin who's older than me. And I reached out to her and I said, hey, this is what's going on. What do you think? And I had just never been that vulnerable. And the only way I'd been vulnerable before was when the disclosure first came with my former husband's pornography. They did have a men's Sunday school group that was processing, and all the wives then were in another group. But there was no book for the wives. This is so long ago. And when the guys finished their book, which was a Promise Keeper's book or something, it was like they were done. There was a summer session, and then that's supposed to fix everything. But the small group of wives, we had very few in-depth conversations. It was truly the blind leading the blind. And we were in some back room, which definitely added to the shame. I don't know if anybody thought they were giving us privacy to protect us or what, but it didn't feel that way at the time.
Yeah, because the men are in a Promise Keepers group, so it looks good. And then the wives are stuck back in the corner with no resources.
Yeah.
I think, like you were saying, seeing that it's all your fault. I think somehow in that messaging that we get, as we got that as kids, that you don't have a voice and don't rock the boat. Anytime anything goes wrong, we somehow, with our childlike thinking, somehow it's our fault. And so then that's the filter that we continue to see and continue to feel things like there's problems here. It has to be me. It has to be me. And then, that shame of I'm going to stay hidden, because if I show somebody how big of a mess I am, I let them know what's going on, then they're going to know that this is all my fault. And I've been trying to fix it, like I'm doing all the things and it's not working. Well, maybe you're doing all the things and it's not working because it's not actually your responsibility.
I know. And I was just in shock to talk about sex, and did not know that the poor treatment that I received during sex and outside of sex were all connected. I just, it's such a difficult experience. I really say that I went through some disassociation because I couldn't own who I was in intimacy, because that meant I was okay with it. But I had to continue because that was the expectation.
Yeah, because you're being a good wife and trying to make it work. And
That's right.
As you learn to use your voice, what changed for you?
Oh boy, everything. I have friends that I knew from before, and they're like, Mary, you are a different person. You don't sound the same. You don't look the same. You don't even walk the same. You just carry yourself completely different. And I realize, I look back and I think so many parts of my previous life are fuzzy, but I was suppressed and I was in a shadow, anticipating the other shoe to drop, walking on eggshells, all of those expressions that we use. So when I first started using my voice, it was uncomfortable. It was new. It wasn't the normal thing. And I really didn't have I didn't have as many people to like check myself with as far as, hey, I'm trying this. Does this feel normal or not normal? And I think that would have helped. I ended up in a domestic abuse support group right about that same time. And I remember going to my first meeting, and I'm literally sitting next to a woman with a broken back. And at that moment, I'm looking around the room thinking, I'm obviously in the wrong place and need to go. That didn't happen to me. I went back for 6 weeks. They had free pizza, so that was important. But I went back for 6 weeks, and it was that long until I actually spoke up, because I was so unfamiliar with what emotional abuse was, and that the experiences that I have could have fallen under a description of emotional abuse.
What's that like to kind of be in a place where you have to like put that label on yourself or on the behavior you've been experiencing?
There was a time when I had to forgive myself, because when I realized some of the ways that I had enabled it, even though I was following the Christian teaching, I still had let myself. As a matter of fact, in preparation for today, I wrote down one of my favorite quotes, and I've had this one pretty much since the beginning of my recovery journey, and you will recognize it, I'm sure. So this is Eleanor Roosevelt, who said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." And I had unofficially given my consent. It wasn't like I was saying, please, please, I want to be a doormat where you walk all over me. But by not standing up, or, and there were times that I did stand up, but I was just, oh, Mary, you struggle with this, and kind of patronizing. And I'm like, It didn't work. So a lot of trial and error with that one.
What would you recommend? What would be a first step for a woman that feels like, I've been suppressing my voice?
Well, I hope just this kind of dialogue lets them know you're not alone. Unfortunately, it's too common, but you're in good company if you're at that place of realizing it. And it is a God-honoring journey to come to that awareness and to begin to step into your identity.
Do you feel they probably just really go together, but does it come before the other? Do you need to see who you are to start using your voice, or do you start using your voice to see who you are?
I think they are almost one and the same. Certainly, when the inside becomes more in alignment, then the outside, the outer expression follows. But it is a trial and error experience. The identity work in God, wow, that was foundational. And continues, of course, to be foundational. It's not ever done, but I am more at peace, and I recognize when I'm letting things slip, and I know what to do when I'm letting it slip and how to get back on track.
What did that work look like for you to find your identity in God?
Understanding the lies that you believed about yourself. And being able to replace that with God's truth. That is the heart of it. But knowing what was a lie and what wasn't. I'm like, but I feel rejected. I feel like I've been rejected. So that must mean I am someone that can be rejected. It's like the behavior started to line up with the lie. And that's when it was really difficult to break through that. But then I realized regardless of what any person says or does, their treatment of me is not the final authority. It's what God says that is the final authority, and God does not reject me. God does not see me as unlovable. And coming back to that truth again and again, and just I can just like feel it wash over me right now. So powerful. And knowing I get to partner with that. I get to agree with that. I get to live that out and embrace it. And it gets stronger and stronger the more that you do it.
Yeah, that's a lot of the work I do with my clients, and realizing like those lies came for a reason. A wound there, like that's where the enemy comes and plants those lies.
Yeah, for sure.
Is in those wounds. And that's how you do feel rejected, and you do feel second rate and whatever, because that's how you were treated. If we don't know better, if we don't have someone to teach us, then we just live in that pattern. And the more we partner with it, the more it seems true. So then, well, what's the truth? Like, well, I don't know. It seems like I'm a pretty big mess and like all this stuff that's my fault. But no, that's been your experience, but that's not who you are. So learning to separate your experience from who you are. That I love that you bring that back to like, no, God's the final authority, because it's not my experience that defines me. It's my creator that defines me.
Yes. And one of the ways that I've seen this and worked through it, I've followed an inner healing practice called Masha. And the emphasis with that is that your beliefs about yourself influence your behavior. So you can have proof that your beliefs have changed when your behavior has changed. Because when all of this internal work is going on, it's hard to see, am I making progress? Am I getting free? Is change happening? And when those behaviors begin to change, then you can tell, I am really transforming into this whole person that God has already made me to be. And that's encouraging too.
Yeah. And that's part of where community is so powerful, because we get so lost in the work that we often can't see it. But if you've got a community around you to be like, no, you're different. You wouldn't have handled this way before. You wouldn't have spoke up. You wouldn't have shared, or that like, oh, I can see you're walking different. You're carrying yourself different. So having that community is so, so helpful. Did you have other thoughts you wanted to share today?
Yes, I did sort of capture this with an ABC, some steps, and we kind of already have covered it, but this is a quick way to capture it. So A, accept yourself. And that is your strengths and all of you. So that place of acceptance is very scary, but empowering. And the reason you can accept yourself is because God already has. B is to believe God's truth over the lies. And for me, they all fall under that not good enough category in some particular way or another. So we get to believe God's truth instead. And then C is to choose to bring value to your role in the relationship. And that comes out in the respect that you expect. So if you're in dialogue with someone, and maybe it's someone that you've had the problems with in the past, then you can sense if there's respect there or not, and you get to choose what behavior you want at that moment. And it's certainly safe and honoring to acknowledge, it doesn't feel like there's respect right now, and I'm going to leave, but I'm happy to come back and continue the conversation when it feels respectful. So knowing that you have choices over your behavior not over anybody else's behavior. But the fact that you can take a stand like that will begin that domino effect, that ripple effect. And that's movement. And anytime you have that kind of momentum going, I believe it's easier for God to step in, for God to, you're moving, and he can guide you when you're moving easier than he can guide you if you have just planted your heels.
Yeah, saying you can't steer a parked car.
Exactly. Yep.
Like,
yep.
Get moving. If you're moving the wrong direction, at least he can turn you around. But if you're not moving at all,
for sure,
he's a gentleman. He's not going to kick you into drive and push you down the hills. Do you feel like before you knew how to use your voice, were you confused about what was yours to control and what wasn't, and what you were responsible for and what you weren't?
There was basically, in my mind, nothing I could control. I always felt like somebody else I was a puppet. Somebody else was manipulating things. And then that did reach outside my marriage. I remember I was moving to Colorado, my whole family, and I wanted to get a job directing a camp. And it was a beautiful setting. And I had done the legwork. I had found the camp. I had started the emails, the calls, the whole bit. I went for appointments, interviews. But then I thought, oh, it all depends if they want to hire me or not. And instead of just saying, I have choices. Even if they offer me the position, I can say, no, I get to control and choose for my life. But that was foreign for me at that time.
We'll be right back.
Art Doodling with Jesus is a membership where I do a live workshop once a month where we explore an emotion or an idea through doodling, which is just a simple creative process. I encourage you to draw with permanent markers and paint with watercolor paint to create space to listen to your emotions, the thoughts that are in your head, and what the Lord wants to say to you. And it's not about creating art. It is not about being good at it. It's about practicing the pause to go, what am I really feeling? What do I really think? What do I really believe on this particular topic? And giving you tools that you can use for yourself and with your kids to continue to explore your emotions outside of the workshops. You can come back and do workshops again and again if you're in the membership, but you also can take the practice that I'm teaching you and do it on your own for what's going on in your life. If you're interested in joining me, there's a link in the description.
Mm-hmm. So then, because I see, like, I know my own journey and a lot of women I talk to, like when you introduce the idea of boundaries and like treating people how to treat you. So to say, like, I don't feel respected, I'm going to leave. Instead, like the first rendition, the first phase we go through, it seems to be like, you can't talk to me that way.
That's right. That's right.
You know, so like making that transition to no, you don't get to tell them they can't talk to you. You get to say you're not going to be in the presence of it. And so like, what was that journey like to figure out like, oh, this is what it looks like to be in control of me?
And in those moments, the adrenaline is running. It's just rushing and charging, and going silent at that moment feels like maybe you are suppressing yourself, but instead you're controlling, you're managing yourself. Confrontation, accusation, whatever the scenario is, and it doesn't feel respectful, then being able to that space is really difficult, because managing these feelings and these emotions, it might be new. So I wasn't a door slammer, but I was a talking back as I walked out. I'm like, no, that won't work either.
No, if I'm stopping the conversation, I have to stop the conversation.
Right. That is so difficult. Yeah.
It's so powerful too to realize, no, I really do always have a choice. And I guess like if for any of the ladies that are listening that are going, no, not in this age, I don't, that's an indication that for one, there's lies you're believing because you do always have a choice. But to look at when you're going, no, I don't, like, I can't say this, I can't do that, is because you're trying to control something outside of your control. You know, you're trying to, like, I can't say that because this is how they're going to respond. I can't say that because this is going to be that. Well, it doesn't mean you can't say it. It might be wisdom to choose not to say it, but it doesn't mean you can't. And maybe it just means you need more backup plans. Like, you know, like if the conversation gets disrespectful, I'm going to leave. That's a plan. You've pre-decided this is what I'm going to do, is how I'm going to handle it. So looking at other situations and deciding like, what's my exit plan in this situation so that I do still feel like I have a choice and I know what I'm choosing. And, you know, maybe they're going to get mad and they're going to throw a tantrum for the next 4 days. Okay, how are you going to handle that? Instead of I can't speak because they're going to do this. No, you can do it. And then how are you going to deal with the backlash if that's what's coming?
And you have tools. What do I say? I follow Danny Silk's teachings, Keep Your Love On, Love and Logic, which is a lot of what he uses. And the premise of that are one-liners. What can I say that is a statement of respect and acknowledging I heard words come out of your mouth, but also is respecting yourself and being, as we keep saying, being able to exit. And it puts some responsibility back on the other party, which they may not have wanted. The other thing I'll say is, because I talk with a lot of clients that are wrestling with this as well, and I've heard it from husbands and wives, but they're anticipating their spouse's next comment. So they basically have this entire conversation going on of what they're anticipating, and they're entangled even before they begin, and just completely drained. And I want to encourage people to just worry about your words and your actions that are respectful. And if it's respectful towards you, you really grasp that, it is ultimately going to be respectful for your spouse and the situation at large.
So what kind of tools do you give couples if they feel like they're having these same conversations over and over again, so that like they have that pattern that this is what I'm anticipating, this is how it goes if we talk about this?
One of the main things I do is teach couples to have conversations outside of the conflict. Because if they can diffuse regularly, then that conflict situation is not going to be the same thing that they have been experiencing. So I use a relationship development guide. I didn't create it. I don't even know the source, but it's fabulous. It's called a daily temperature reading. And there are like 7 different levels, topics of conversation, and they include pleasant things like a word of encouragement and praise. They include a surface level of communication, just, hey, I need to let you know about some plans that are coming up. It includes things like hopes and wishes and dreams. But there's also a couple of spots in there to express a concern about a behavior, you're puzzled, or even a request for change. So if that is a pattern, now it says daily temperature reading, but if couples could do it weekly or even monthly, it makes a big difference because they're not waiting for in the moment. Those in the moment things that go really bad are when they snowball. Because you're not just addressing this one situation, you add all of the other things that have been building. And so nobody wins in that situation. It's got to be more proactive. And when you're proactive, you're also preventative.
Yeah. And so often those conversations snowball because, well, for one, you haven't been talking about stuff. So it's like, well, now that I did speak, now
You
there's
get it
this and
all.
this and this too. But we often say things that trigger the other person. And when we're triggered, when we're emotional, and I remind moms of this all the time, if your child is emotional, same with your spouse, and if you're you can't be emotional and logical at the same time. So trying to have a conversation to get somewhere and to get some resolution when either one of you is emotional is just setting it up to snowball and get worse and worse.
Absolutely.
But there's that like desperation of like, but we need to fix it. Yeah, but not right now. It's not going to work right now.
And some people walk away, but don't want to ever go back because it was so uncomfortable. And they think that if we're not fighting, we're okay. And those issues, if they're not addressed, then of course they don't go away on their own.
Yeah, they just lay low until the next time they have an opportunity to pop up.
That's it. That's it.
I've so enjoyed talking to you, and I think I have like a whole different set of questions for a different conversation. Any parting thoughts you want to leave with the ladies today?
One of my go-tos, I think it was my first Christmas single, which was really, really tough. But I remember seeing this, a cartoon or something, and it said to see yourself with your inner Mary. Now, my name's Mary, so that was a play on words for me because they were using the spelling Merry, like Merry Christmas. And I thought, let's take that a new way. Let's see ourselves with our inner God design. If we can see ourselves the way God sees us, that's a pursuit of ours, then that is just going to be a sweet spot. And God will continue revealing. It's like as we're reaching for him, he is reaching for us. And that's how that transformation really takes place.
Yeah, and that comes back to that identity piece.
Exactly.
Seeing how God sees you. Thank you so much for your time today, Mary. I really enjoyed talking to you, and
that's great. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Kingdom Mothers Rise Up podcast. I'm blessed to have you here. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can join us in the Kingdom Mothers Rise Up Facebook community. When you're ready for more support, I have the Heart Doodling with Jesus monthly membership, periodic group coaching, and one-on-one personalized coaching as well. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.